Okay, so we're continuing in Geras Tshuva, doing chapters 8 and 9. This is where he explains the Indian of Tshuva law. So, what we learned yesterday was that Tshuva Tata, the lower level of Tshuva, is primarily about removing the barrier between me and Hashem. So when Hashem, again, using the metaphor of blowing, when Hashem blows, if there's something blocking, then the breath of Hashem's mouth doesn't reach me. So that's a metaphor that our connection with our source is cut off. And therefore, when we do Tshuva Tata, what do we accomplish? We remove the barrier, and now our connection with Hashem is complete. What's Tshuva? Tshuva is, okay, now that there are no barriers, now there's something deeper. How can I deepen my connection to Hashem? That not only am I connected with the source of Hashem's blowing, so to speak, but I reconnect and I return to the way the neshama was before Hashem even blew. In other words, just like Begashmias, that if there's nothing blocking, then the breath is connected to the one that's blowing. But there's even a higher level, and that is the breath of the person's mouth before they blow is part of them. It's one with them in the most absolute way. So that is the second level, that not only there's nothing blocking, and not only there are no barriers, but now we're doing something to deepen the connection, that the neshama down here in the guf should be united with Hashem and one with Hashem, like it was before it even came down. And how is that accomplished? So he says mainly through Torah study, studying Torah with love and fear of Hashem. I didn't focus on this yesterday, so let me elaborate on this a little bit more. So looking at the Tanya, we are using Lessons in Tanya, the most recent edition. So looking at Tanya in chapter 8, so page 264, that's where he spells it out, that what is it, Tshuva law, what is it that is able to accomplish that deeper unity, that we become connected to Hashem at the deepest level. On the top of page 264, as it's written in the Zohar HaKadosh, the Tshuva law is the asik be'iraisa b'dechilu u'rechima l'kutchabrichu. When a person studies Torah with love and fear of Hashem. So basically, it's Torah study that enables a person to have that deepest connection to Hashem. But he also adds that the Torah study that we're talking about has to be with love and fear of Hashem. We know that generally speaking, there are two ways of studying Torah. One is where a person is studying Torah and there's questions, there are answers, it's information, using my intellect, and it could even be studied like any other academic subject. Not necessarily that this is motivated by and that it's infused with feelings of love and awe of Hashem. But the proper way of studying Torah is, and the same with all mitzvahs, but the same with Torah, and especially with Torah, because Torah is so deep, and because Torah is so enjoyable, and because Torah is so intellectual, we can get sort of caught up in the intellectual aspect of it. But the true way to study Torah is that it's permeated with love and fear of Hashem. And that what motivates me to study Torah, and what's my real enjoyment of studying Torah, is the fact that through Torah study, I become one with Hashem. And that kind of Torah study, that's what deepens the connection. That's the tshuva ilah. And then he said that this is alluded to in the word bina. Why bina? Remember the sheets that I gave you about Hashem's name. So in that chart, we showed that the Yud is Chochmah, and the Hey, the first Hey in Hashem's name is Bina. Because Bina means understanding. And that's what it means, that the Tshuva Ilah is through Bina, is through learning and understanding. The only thing is, there should be a little question here. The word Bina says made up of two words, Ben Yud K. It means the child of Yud K. Why child? So I guess we're talking about learning, understanding. It should be just the understanding part. Why do we bring in the child? So we said yesterday that emotion is born out of the intellect. It says in Chassidus that the intellect is the source of emotion. And that's why in Tanya, Chochmah and Bina are considered the parents of emotion. And just like parents give birth to a child, that's how emotion gives birth, that's how intellect gives birth to emotion. And by the way, this is something which in the world of psychology was not recognized until not that long ago. It was understood that emotion is emotion. I guess the theory behind the whole idea of CBT, right, which is what does it stand for? Cognitive behavioral therapy, is that if you change the way you think, it'll change the way you feel. And I understand when whoever first came up with this, he was challenged and they were against him and they felt that he's going against all the principles of psychology. But now it's becoming more and more acceptable, and it's based on the principle which is written here in Tanya, and yet from the Zohar, that midos, emotion, are children, and the brain creates the emotion, and the way you think, that will determine how you will feel. If you want to change the way you feel, change the way you think, change the way you perceive, change what's in your thoughts. So, being that we're saying it's not just enough to learn Torah, but it has to be with emotion. And emotion, these are the children of the intellect. So that's why Bina is Ben Yud K. That's why he talks about the child. But I said at the end of the class yesterday was why Bina? Why do we say Bina? It's Chochmah and Bina. It's both, not just Bina is the source of the child. So we know in Chassidus, Chochmah is like the father, and Bina is like the mother. And it means just like that the whole process of birth, the way it is physically, biologically, the same process takes place in the nefesh, and the same thing with the spheros, that is the contribution of both Chochmah and Bina. And therefore, just like the Gashmias, the one who's mostly connected to developing the baby and all the details, carrying the baby and delivering the baby, that's all the mother. So too, spiritually, and so too in the nefesh, that emotion comes mainly from Bina more than it comes from Chochmah, even though both are involved. Why is that? And try to explain it. And if you have any questions, tell me. But generally speaking, remember we learned that the difference between Chochmah and Bina is Chochmah is abstract. Chochmah is the essence of the concept in the most abstract way. And it's not related to anything specific. As we explained, that you can have a concept in the world of science, in the world of math, in the world of psychology, in the world of physics, in the world of Torah, in the world of Chassidus. The principles of logic are the same, but they're not connected. The essence of the principle of logic is not connected to anything specific. So that's abstract. When logic is abstract, it won't lead to emotion. In order for intellect to lead to emotion, it has to be sort of apply to something specific. So let's say if a person doesn't feel excited about doing a certain mitzvah, you can't just think about logic and it's abstract. That won't get me excited about the mitzvah. Have to think about this logic, how it pertains to the mitzvah. I want to say something to myself that would make me a better parent, that would make me a better spouse, that would make me do my business in a more honest way. So the thought has to be related to a specific subject. If it's going to be abstract, it won't get me anywhere. So the part of the intellectual process that leads to emotion is mainly bina more than it is chachma. Just like physically, it's the woman that carries the baby, develops the baby, and delivers the baby more than the father. So bina is ben yudke, the child that's born out of the intellect. Follow? Was this too abstract? It was Benedict. Yeah, okay. Which one? Of what?
The first one was the mouth. There's two in Hashem's four-letter name, which when we say Bina is Ben.
Oh, the first hay. The first hay, right. That's called Ke'ilah, the higher hay. Okay. So even though we're talking about a deeper connection to Hashem, remember the reason why it's called tshuva, because it's about returning to the way it was before. That the person recognized that my neshama was so much, its connection to Hashem was so much deeper, and I want to go back to experience. I want my neshama to feel that bond with Hashem the way it was before it even came down. So now let's go to chapter 9. Let's continue. Ubiru inyan. To explain this further, Bina ihi tshuva. And again, there's another pasuk which also shows a connection between Bina and the emotions. There's a pasuk which says, "Ha'em rebetzes ala afreichem." The mother is crouching over the chickens. In other words, it's the mother, Bina, that's connected to the emotions. There's also another pasuk, we say this in Hallel. Aim habonim smecha, the mother of the children is happy, which means the emotions are mainly connected to Bina. So what does Bina mean? From page 266, by meditating on the greatness of Hashem, by mokas hadas, but concentrating deeply into it. And through this meditation and comprehension, this arouses a sense of awe and love in the mind. The tuv tam vadas. Kinyan shenema, like it says, la'abas Hashem alakecha, to love God your God, v'shum kuhu chayecha. So he's explaining how we see how there's a meditation that if you think about this, it'll create love for Hashem. There's a pasuk. Love for Hashem because He is your life, which means that a person would stop and think, my true life, it's not about money, and it's not about the food that I eat, and it's not the job that I have, and it's not about other things that give me life. My true life is Hashem. And every moment that I breathe and everything that I have in my life is all from Hashem. If a person wouldn't just think about this as a fleeting thought, but really spend time thinking and meditating and in a way that he really understands it, this will lead to love for Hashem. So here's where logic leads to emotion. In other words, this person is not content with that natural love which everyone has. And the same as with other emotions, as fear and awe or shame, that I do something wrong. All this, if I think about Hashem and I think about it in a way that there's logic to it, that logic will stimulate these feelings, these emotions. Azai nekras, when I do that, that's when it's called aim revesel afreichem, the mother crouching over the chicks, meaning the bina gives birth and hovers over the offspring, which is love and fear. We need to explain this a little bit. Are we talking about Torah study, or are we talking about love and fear of Hashem? On one hand, it's about Torah study, it's about deepening our connection to Hashem through learning. That's why we're emphasizing Bina. And then he's elaborating on the emotion. So we need to explain something, and then we'll see this inside. First of all, it's Torah study. That's the main thing. And the reason for that is because there's no connection deeper than through Torah study. Even mitzvahs connects us to Hashem, but not as deep as through Torah. Like in some places, it explains that when a person does mitzvahs, that will become compared to, let's say, a servant who is devoted, loyal, and dedicated to his master, to the king. And he does everything the way the king wants it with all his heart and all his soul. But nevertheless, the servant is still somewhat separate from the king. He has his own identity. That's the way it is when we do mitzvahs. When a person studies Torah, which means in my head, I'm now experiencing Hashem's wisdom, my brain is now absorbing, becoming one with Hashem's understanding, then it's in a sense, I become Torah, or the Torah in me is Hashem. My unity with Hashem is so much deeper. You know, it's interesting, there was, we all know Rabbi Yosef Cairo is the author of the Shulchan Aruch. He also wrote another book, which is a more Kabbalah. And it's known that Rabbi Yosef Cairo used to learn Torah with an angel. And sometimes those people who were stood around him would actually hear the voice of the angel speaking. And when he would teach him, let's say, a Mishnah, he would say, Ani ha-Mishnah ha-medaber b'ficha. I am the Mishnah speaking out of your mouth. In other words, it's not that I'm studying something else. The Mishnah itself is coming out of my mouth, and it's in my head, and I become one with Torah. Because the Torah is Hashem's wisdom, and that becomes my wisdom, so the unity is so much deeper. The only thing is that in order for this to be a true unity with Hashem, it has to be Torah study out of love and fear of Hashem. Otherwise, it's just like anything else, academic. So it has to be both things. But nevertheless, the main aspect of it is Torah. And that's why it says the mothers are hovering over the children. So basically it means like this. This is the general idea. And of course, there are more details to this. That even when you talk about emotion, love and fear of Hashem, there's two types of emotion. There's sometimes emotion which it's pure emotion. And even though it was sort of created and produced by the intellect, but what I feel mainly is the feelings of emotion. And there are times that even when I am engaged in the emotion, what's more pronounced is the intellect, the logic, and the reason behind the emotion, which means the emotion is filled with logic to the point that you feel the logic more than you feel the emotion. And there's some cases where you feel the emotion more than you feel the logic. I'm going to say something which I think might be an example, maybe not perfect, but some idea. Good morning, Leah. Now the morning has begun. The morning begins 5 to 9 today. Okay.
One day will come for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amen. Not only one day, do it more than one day.
No. One day.
Okay. There's a pasuk in Chumash where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron to light the menorah, how to light it, what to do. And after that, it says these words, Vayas Kain Aaron. And Aaron did everything that Moshe told him to do. So Rashi says, this teaches us the praise of Aaron. What's the praise of Aaron? Shvach shel Aaron. that he didn't change anything from what Moshe Rabbeinu told him. He did exactly as he was told. So there's an obvious question here. This is Moshe Rabbeinu, who hears directly from Hashem what you should do. He tells this to Aaron, who is himself a great tzaddik. So what is the praise of Aaron that he was so amazing? He listened to Moshe and everything. He didn't change anything. What would you expect? Hashem says to Moshe, you tell Aaron to do it this way and that way. Why would I even think that Aaron would do it differently? So the way the Rebbe explains it in Chassidus is that, of course, Aaron wasn't an ordinary person and not even an ordinary tzaddik. He was a tzaddik on par with Moshe Rabbeinu. So when Aaron lit the menorah, he didn't just light the menorah the way we light our Hanukkah menorah. He knew all the deep secrets and everything that happens in all the spiritual worlds and everything that happens all over when you light the menorah. When you light the first candle, when you light the second candle, when you light all 7 candles, he knew and he saw and he felt everything that's happening spiritually that changed in the whole world every time you lit the menorah. So you imagine when a person understands all that and sees all that it would make them very excited and very emotional. And when a person gets emotional, very often they can't focus and concentrate on doing things precisely the way they need to be done, not because they don't want to do it right, just because they're so emotional that they can't keep so focused that everything should be right with the absolute precision. We all know with ourselves, when you get excited about something, you're rushing somewhere, you forget this and you forget that because you're so emotional about getting somewhere, doing something, and you run out to the street, you run into your car, and you go to the door and you realize you don't have the keys. How did that happen? You're running to the car. How'd you forget your keys? But you were so excited about whatever reason you have to run for that you forgot to get your keys. That's no. When a person is lighting the menorah and he is in a storm of emotion, something should have happened. The oil should spill a little bit, something too much, something too little, something moves out of the way. The greatness of Aaron was, and actually we know many stories of tzaddikim. One of them was the famous tzaddik, Rabbi Majesky. He was known to be very emotional when it came to davening, to learning, to do mitzvahs. And they tell a story about him that he was once, it was Sukkot, and mitzvah of Sukkah you do right away at night. But the lulav and the esrog you can't do till the morning. But he was so excited about doing the mitzvah, he couldn't fall asleep. He was up all night. He couldn't wait for the moment that he can run to do this mitzvah. And he was up a whole night with anticipation. And then as soon as he was able to, he ran to the mikveh, immersed himself in the mikveh, purified himself. He ran home and he ran over to grab the esrog. But his hands were shaking and he was so excited. The esrog fell on the floor. The pitum on top broke and it was busted. He couldn't use the esrog. He didn't mean to break the esrog. But that's what happens when you're very emotional. There's a story with the Rebbe Rashab. Rabbi Fall Khan, Mrs. Gansberg, used to be the door mother. Her father wrote a book, a lot of stories which he witnessed himself. This is one of those stories. There was a Farbrengen with the Rebbe Rashab, and he said in general it was a very extraordinary Farbrengen. And the Rebbe said a mimer. And when the Rebbe said the mimer, there was so much pushing, the table that he was sitting by broke. The legs broke. They didn't want to take the table out because that would be like a disturbance. So he took out one leg, passed it down, took out another leg, passed it down, piece by piece, passed down the table. Anyway, the Rebbe at the end of the mimer looks around and said, what happened to the table? And then he told the story. Rabbi Majesky once went to shecht a chicken. Took the knife, had the chicken, started to make the bracha. Baruch Atah Hashem. The chicken sees that he's way into his bracha, he's like on a high. The chicken ran for her life. When he finished the bracha, there was no chicken to shecht. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. When you get very emotional about something, not everything is so precise. The greatness of Aaron was that even though he understood the greatness of Menorah, and even though he was definitely on the highest level of emotion, but outwardly it didn't affect him in any way. He was able to do everything precise. Not because he was lacking emotion, but on the contrary, this shows the greatness of his emotion, that he was on such a high and yet was able to do things exactly precisely the way it's supposed to be. But what does that mean? Was he emotional or was he not emotional? So this is what it says in Maimorim, that this is the difference between intellect and emotion. Intellect is calm. Emotion is stormy. And one of the reasons that the intellect is in a deeper place in the soul. Emotion is in a more superficial, external place in the soul. We spoke about this in the beginning, that emotion is, what does emotion mean? That someone makes me feel low, or someone makes me feel anger, or someone makes me feel fear. In other words, emotion is a part of my soul that's affected and is moved by things outside of myself. Intellect, I can understand the deepest things in the world, doesn't necessarily have to move me. So intellect is in a deep place of the soul that I'm not moved so much by what goes on the outside. It's a very deep place in my neshama. So therefore, intellect is calm, and therefore you can think about things. A person could be studying Torah and learning. If this person killed the other person and this happened and that happened, they don't get all emotional about it because it's all on an academic level. But when you think about this not on an academic level, it affects you. So intellect is calm. When we say that there's a person that could be very deep and has high emotions, and yet outwardly they're not like jumping and falling apart, is because not because they're lacking, but because it's so deep, and that's why there's nothing on the outside that's so stormy. I mean, to give an example, what's greater love? The love that I love myself or the love that I love another person? Which love is greater?
Depends on the person.
Well, the love for other people comes and goes, as we know. Oh, so what does that prove? That the highest love is the love that I love myself. In fact, everything will move out of the way because of my own love. Torah is telling us we should love others like we love ourselves. But the greatest love is the love that I love myself. Because love for other people, I'll get to in a second, is a love that sometimes could be, and it could even be strong, and then something happens and it's gone. Self-love is something which is unconditional, it's always there. So love for self is much stronger. Yeah, much greater.
What about people who have a very easy time loving other people and not such an easy time loving themselves?
I don't know. Every rule has an exception to the rule. So that's an exception. Let's talk about the generals and the way it goes. Generally speaking, most people love themselves to the point that everything else will go out of the way for self-love, and they'll do everything which makes them happy and makes them feel good, and that's more important. And again, love for other people could be something which would be discontinued, and it happens all the time. Love for myself is my entire life. I love myself. It's something unconditional. People will do everything in the world because they want to survive, they want to live, they want to be, because they love themselves. If that, I just want to say, so just to conclude my thoughts, if that's the case, how come when people have love for another person, there's a lot of storm and fire and so much going on, thunder and lightning? Self-love is so calm. You don't find people standing in front of a mirror and jumping up and down and excited about themselves most of the time. Yes, Leah.
I heard one thing, but I don't know if you will agree with. So listen, basically, you should love. If you have lack of love to yourself, you should love others. You how you wish you would love yourself. That's what I heard. That it's like sometimes, like if you didn't develop like self love on healthy level, you should love others and treat them as the way you want yourself to treat yourself and people to treat you.
Okay, it still doesn't change the subject of
I don't have answers to all the questions.
Okay. So what's the answer? Why is it that if I love myself, it's an unconditional love, and it's stronger than anything else, and it'll override everything else, then why isn't the love for myself so much more stormier than the love for a stranger which I meet in my life and I love that other person? What? Because I am me. That's why. Because I'm one. In other words, I'm so much one with me that there's no storm. The storm comes from the fact that there are two people, and one has the storm of love to another person. But if it's me, myself, and I, then there's no fire. It's almost like friction creates fire, but there is only one thing: there is no fire. So the fact that self-love looks calmer than a love for another person is not because the self-love is less, it's because the self-love is actually deeper. It's one. And the same thing is also spiritually, that when a person reaches the level of love for Hashem, that is so deep, that's what with Aaron, the love was so deep that he became so much one with what he understood and what he felt, and that's why he didn't see that storm that was able to interfere with him doing things in a precise way. So again, if there's a person that has love for Hashem, and outwardly there's this huge storm, that's a very high level. We would wish one day in our life to have that kind of feeling of love for Hashem, but still, it's on a certain level, it's external compared to the love that comes from this deep place. So when you see someone, I remember there was someone who, in other Hasidic circles, they're much more used to the Rebbe getting very emotional in davening, clapping his hands, jumping up and down, and there was such, great tzaddikim that when they davened, you saw all their emotion, and you could see that they were on fire with their love for Hashem. So one time, one of these Chassidim came into 770, was watching the Rebbe daven. It was actually this time of the year before Rosh Hashanah. And he looks and he's like in shock. He never stands. 4 days before Rosh Hashanah, looks the same like all year. Looks like everybody else is standing, hardly even shaking. But he understood, and he said like this: in order to be standing so calmly a few days before Rosh Hashanah, you have to be either very high or very low. Either you don't feel anything, or just the opposite, just somewhere so high that it's above it. But what does that mean? It means that the emotions are so deep. So now what causes the emotion to be so deep is because intellect is very deep. And therefore, if the intellect is more pronounced, then the emotions will be more like intellectual emotions, that it'll be very deep emotion. And that means that it'll also connect me to Hashem in a much deeper way. So something along these lines is what he's saying here, that the mother hovers over the babies, which means there are babies, there's emotion. But the mother, which meaning the intellect, hovers over the emotion, that in this emotional experience, you feel the intellect, the logic, the reason, and therefore they have the intellectual flavor to it, that it's something very, very deep, much more than the general feeling of emotion. And that's the kind of learning Torah that brings the deepest connection with Hashem. But nevertheless, once you do study Torah and it does bring that deep connection with Hashem, this deep connection with Hashem affects us all the way. It becomes all-encompassing, that I want to connect Hashem with every fiber of my being. So that's what he's saying on the next page, 267. Anyway, what I just said, was this understood? In other words, my question is, was it totally, didn't get it? Or there's a question, or there are no questions? Yes.
Yeah, the question is, like, are we saying all the emotions, all the emotions are in the intellect, some are, like the ones where it's deeper, like the example with the Rebbe davening, those are more connected to the intellect and they're deeper than like the emotions where someone's like jumping and balancing.
Right. No, if I see someone davening very calm, it could be two possibilities. Yeah. In fact, in Hasidus, there's two terms for love. That sometimes love is compared to fire, sometimes compared to water. Obviously, fire is the stormy love. Water is a calm love. The reason why it's calm could be two reasons. Either because I don't have that fire, or the opposite, it's so deep and that's why there's no fire. So it doesn't mean always, it means there's a possibility that sometimes the love is so much affected by it's so much connected to the intellect, and therefore it has that nature of the intellect, which is being calm because it's deeper in the soul, and therefore it's calm. But it's not because it's lacking in love. On the contrary, it's a deeper love.
Like love that's fire stormy and love that's deeper. They're both from the intellect. Just one.
Right.
Deeper.
One is sort of less connected to the intellect, and one, the intellect still remains very much felt in the emotion. The question is, what's the difference to that? Why that happens? We're going to get lost if we go there, right? But primarily love is staptus rucha berucha. The main thing about love is the bonding of one spirit to another spirit. The person that loves and the person that's being loved become one. Their spirits become one. Like it says, it says in Shir Hashirim, using the whole Shir Hashirim is a metaphor of a husband and wife and a chassan and a kala, and it's all about Hashem and the Bnei Yisrael. And it says that Hashem sort of kisses us. What does that mean? Just like Begashmias, people can express love through speech, through talking, saying words of love, and the other person hears the words of love, and that's how they connect. And when the love is so much stronger than that, that words are not enough to contain and express the love, then it's expressed through the kissing. So Hashem kisses us means it's a love, an overwhelming love. But the main thing is not the physical act, but that through this act, two spirits become one. That's why we say in davening, you should love God your God with all your heart, with all your soul, which means with every fiber of my being. I want every part of my neshama. I want this love to Hashem to be all encompassing. And then he's going to go into the details. What does it mean, all encompassing? That every part in me becomes connected to every aspect in Hashem. And he's going to go through intellect, emotion, thought, speech, and action. To be continued tomorrow, Amir Hashem. Okay, so we're holding here, page 367.
Short question. What do people feel like introverts and their emotions are very hard to control? Do they have the struggle that emotions are over their safe point? Because it's not fair to people who give extra.
We have to ask a psychologist. Maybe Mrs. Horowitz could help us out. I know you have to. I don't know what it's all about when a person's an introvert. What does it mean psychologically going on in their mind, their heart? So I can't answer that question. Maybe 24 hours later, right? We'll be saying at the Chayrin Lodem Das. We ask for bracha for brains in Mincha. I asked again for Myri. I'll ask again in the morning. So by the time I get here, I might be a little bit smarter.
Yeah.